Good morning. So we had a late bailout, and I volunteered, or was voluntold, to jump in and fill the gap. So I apologize in advance. I threw these slides together really quickly. It's an amalgam of other talks I do, but it was inspired by some work I've been doing the last 6 months. And I'm going to fly through the slides because I have way too many to cover, but these slides will be made available. There's a lot of links and a lot of things on them. So this is about how water data is a really cool scientific and technology-based thing, but it really, at the end of the day, from our perspective, it's part of a government service. And it's part of a government service or a history of services that have essentially led to racial inequity throughout the country and even in California. So these red line districts and what have you that establish some of the basis for which nowadays are, if you line up where our treatment plants are, if you line up where the industrial sites are, where the air deposition is happening, it tends to line up very closely with old areas of the communities that were essentially created in a way that encouraged more concentration of people with non-white backgrounds and non-English speaking backgrounds. So there's a lot of work to try to undo some of this, and this is a bit of an explanation for where the CalEPA and the water boards are trying to go in this water data world, which is actually a really important interface. So this slide's kind of busy. I'm just going to, again, these slides are available, but CalEPA has a cohort. It's year 2 of our cohort for this thing called the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. It's a national network. And so this is the year 2. Year 1 was made up of planning activities. Year 2 is about implementing, and there's some early actions here. The principles of this are really to try to make a commitment for achieving racial equity throughout the work we do. And this is, again, the concept is that all the government services, when they stack up together, they essentially represent the government together. We all think of our agencies as different, but really the health, the education, the corrections, the justice, the environment, the whatever part of the government interface in that community stacks up to be one, essentially, face of government. So we need to figure out how to work together to undo some of that stuff. So the priority actions, we're looking at some demographic data for our human resources at the workforce stuff. There's really 3 areas of action that we're taking. One is on workforce. One is on recruitment and promotion workforce. One is on workforce, the rest of the workforce, and building capacity and training. And then the third area is on language accessibility. So with that in mind, we're working on deploying some early actions associated with the recruitment, and we're looking at the workforce data sets, and I'll go through those really quickly. So these data sets are available. They were turned into machine readable about 3 weeks ago. With the help of CalHR, we now have the whole state of California's workforce by these kinds of parameters. So this is a busy slide. Again, you have access to it, but you can filter, and this is a really beta Power BI visualization I made, but essentially you can look at classes of workers. So you can say all the managers and supervisors, all the people in legal, all the people in architectural and engineering classes, and you can also filter by classes, and you can filter by agency, and you have 7 years of data here. So it's actually pretty interesting when you start thinking about, I don't have what California looks like. I know people always want to see a comparison, but the reality is this is just fascinating data to look at by itself. It speaks its own volume. So this is a slice of, what did I do here? Water board data, all employees. And then as you go through, here's water board, all legal. So it's mostly white. Gender is about 70, 30 maybe. And then here's the administrative services category. So it starts to look more like California on the racial identity, but the gender's significantly skewed towards females. So again, the point is we have to start thinking about these things. I don't really want to make that the point of the presentation, but it's a foundation. I'm starting with that so that then I can talk about what work we're trying to do to engage communities differently with our water data. So the first thing to understand is that open data is a big part of this principle. So we're trying to make all the data open and accessible, and just putting data on a website doesn't make it open and accessible. So this is being driven by statute in California. We have AB 1755 that was adopted a couple of years, 3 years ago or so. We're now coming up with the deadline September 1 to publish all of our open water data in California, 3 state agencies named. There's also, the Water Board adopted a resolution to support that. The State Board has principles that sort of dictate how we're going to do better data management and how we're going to achieve better transparency through open data publication of our data sets. So both of these are available in links. One of the directives of the resolution was for my office to work with the other offices to evaluate the data readiness for open data publication, the data management, how do we improve data workflows and data flows themselves throughout the organization. And so to do that, we, you guys know what open data is. So to do that, we did a bunch of interviews. We interviewed every part of the State Water Board organization, a little bit of the regional board interface, but just that alone was originally, it's a list of 135 people to talk to. So we got to about 100 with the help of Rosic, and Rafa really led the charge in my shop, but we ended up talking to over 100 people. We gained a lot of really interesting insights. We wanted to slice at different levels of managers, executives, staff, programs. We wanted to hit every major program area, every division. So we talked to budgets, we talked to the MPDS, we talked to the whatever folks. So we're still out there doing a couple more interviews, but we're basically done. And so we gained insights, we learned about the inventory, so that when we said we're ready to publish our open data, these 30 data sets are ready. The rest of the 150 or so are gonna take some work to get ready. So we needed to have an idea of what the work ahead of us was, so that was the inventory. We also gleaned some really low-hanging fruit opportunities of what we can do differently and better to make our water data both more useful to us and our program data more useful to us, but more importantly to the public. So this is a data viz of the interviews, just kind of fun to look at, but it's broken down by the divisions and offices and the percent that we've talked to and that we didn't. This is old, so it's been updated, but I just kept the same slide. So again, one of the really interesting insights that Rosic helped develop was the connectivity of our databases to our fee. We're a fee-based organization. We're like 90-something%, I think, fee-based organization, as you heard Joaquin say yesterday. So the importance of our databases for fees, the connection is many of those fee regulatory measures or regulatory devices say things like how many acres of disturbed land are you disturbing, or how many head of cattle do you have at your confined animal facility, or all sorts of data elements. And so we had to build a robust data system throughout the organization to support each one of those important fee pieces. And so where those tendrils touch our databases, we actually have high quality data. We have program knowledge from executives down to staff that are like very well informed on what that data element is, how to improve the data quality. And so the message to me was one of hope. If we can do that for fees, maybe we can do it for other things that are important too. We also found that there's a lot of mandatory reporting. There's a lot of data sets that sort of live in strange places, like PCs and spreadsheets and probably even manual data sets. And then we just learned a lot of interesting things, and we're gonna write this up and make it available pretty soon. So data viz on the fees and how they connect to our different databases. And eventually we'd like to put this together with the actual budget. Wouldn't that be cool to see like which database produces the most amount of money at the Water Board, which data elements are associated with which funding sources and things like that. So there's a lot of room to go with this. There's our enterprise architecture for the Water Board. So this is the problem statement. We have somewhat arbitrary boxes and tuna cans up there, but this is really this is the world. This is an updated version of this. So we have 120 some odd enterprise applications. Probably about up here, there's maybe like 30 core databases that are applications that store important, really, really vital stuff. But we need to fix the data flow between them. So we're trying to improve the data flows using open data and some approaches you've heard me talk about, but this is basically the data lifecycle from top to bottom. We're trying to improve the data flow at every level and improve the data quality and speed it up so that you actually have feedback loops and encourage better data quality collection, better methods, new methods come in, but you also have new needs for visualization. So this is really that life cycle. And the interface that's really important to me is that open data one. So stage 3 is publishing it, because until you do that, nobody quite knows what's in the database, and nobody quite knows what the problems are and what's the first one to fix. So this idea of making flat files and automating the publication of our data is super, super important to the future life of our data. So we're trying to build capacity too at the water boards using data literacy as sort of like the key word. We have a pilot training program that includes a component of an online assessment and content delivery, but we also are designing some classes at different levels, including workshops with data scientists on R, Python, JavaScript library, like whatever the issues are, artificial intelligence. We're going to try to bring these topics in workshop fashion and deploy them to staff that are interested and available. So I'm going to show you some screenshots from our online tool. This is a product called Tuva. We found them a couple years ago. We're working with them to expand this. They are now part of a nationwide Department of Education initiative that is putting data literacy tools in all the schools. This is really what they started, but this is an interactive site. So essentially, we gave them some of our data. They created some of these interactive platform areas with our data, and then they ask questions about it. So you see, for example, the question is asking something about that data. The person answers it based on their knowledge. You're going to be able to assess different things like their basic understanding of survey design, their basic understandings of statistics that are involved with some of the questions and answers. Plotting, data visualization, literacy is being assessed here too. And the idea is that then you can deliver content that's aimed at that particular area for that group. And you can deploy this quickly for large teams that are working on projects too. So we're about to roll out, we're on phase 1 of this. We have a larger phase coming in the next year. These are just more screenshots. So at the end of the day, we hope to make ourselves accountable via our performance report. It's our history. We've been doing this for 10 years. Right now, it's focused on a lot of outputs and outcomes and jargon that isn't really as accessible to people, let alone the people in the communities that we serve that are probably the most deserving of our attention. And so we're trying to make improvements to the performance report. So this is one of the examples. It's a really bad screenshot I made, but you're actually seeing it first for anyone in the public. The next year's performance report is going to be in Power BI. It's open data, and we're piloting some of these areas like inspections. So you can actually see where the inspection was done, under which program type, at what date, who was the inspector in some cases maybe. So this starts to really provide granular data that could geospatially line up with some of those areas where the communities that we want to have different kinds of engagement activities with. So this is the inspection card. This is a look at our enforcement resources. So again, you start to see some really interesting information about where the enforcement resources are done when you line that up with the enforcement activities, the priorities of the different enforcement initiatives around the state. This is one way to start looking at the data too. Near-term projects, I'm going to continue working on, this is about 30% of my job now is on race and equity work, which is super interesting and fascinating, and it dovetails really nicely with the rest of OEMA's mission, which is making water data accessible to everyone. So we built a team to look at some data science elements, and we actually also sought out some data science teammates from national and state cohorts. So we're building up these capacities right now. I showed you that Power BI of the CalEHR data set. That was actually something I did in my spare time. And we hope to get more people doing actually better work because I'm not a data scientist. One of the cool things that we're working on is Latin American indigenous language speaker data gathering so that people who are speaking indigenous languages from different parts of Latin America, Central American, Mixtec and Zapotec areas and what have you, they've brought their language and they really are in islands of accessibility. So we're trying to build a privacy sensitive data map that would allow somebody or anyone in California government who wants to know if they're trying to reach a certain community, where would they have to find these people or what kinds of language accessibility tools would they have to build for those communities. So we're also looking at more redline data sets and libraries. This is a shot from that hackathon that I mentioned yesterday in Stockton. That was a water hackathon. This is the junior high team, Girls Who Code, and they were a winner, and they were awesome. We're going to do that again. Their next topic is harmful algal blooms, and so I'm going to be trying to bring in some extra help from people who want to work on engaging the communities around Stockton. This is run by Restore the Delta. I have the link on the bottom, and they will be running it again, so we're helping them. Here's some more links. The race and equity links are interesting. The national one has lots of resources. There's really good videos out there on systemic racism, what it is, how to understand what the red line issue was and government's role in sort of creating some of these underserved parts of our world. And then the performance report and the other things. The GitHub site has all sorts of things, including work from yesterday's datathon. So that's it. I'll leave you with a quote from Alexander von Humboldt, one of my favorite data scientists. If you've never read about Alexander von Humboldt, you should definitely go find his book of, what was his book was Something About Nature. And then there's a new book interpreting his life called Inventing Nature. And he really set the stage for Darwin and the others. So he's become a bit of a hero of mine. So I'm open for questions. Any questions?
Greg, you got a pretty good overview of these sort of disparate types of data that we're trying to use together. What do you see as the primary difficulties between using the different tuna cans together for interoperability between them? Just as an example, in looking, I remember digging into the eRIMS data set up there, the water rights database. I remember digging into that and finding that while there were locations of withdrawal points in streams, everything was coded based on a water right ID, which reflects basically the objective of the creation of that data set. But for using that data set to support modeling efforts, well, it wasn't as useful anymore because I didn't actually know exactly where that water was being withdrawn. Are there similar types of difficulties that you encounter in trying to use them?
Yeah, each one of these databases was built in its own schema or model, if you will, and it was built at a time when relating everything to everything was really the most important thing, or being able to relate everything to everything, so you could have a water right ID associated with a point of diversion, associated with a beneficial use, associated with other data elements, responsible parties, all sorts of things. So it's built in this sort of data model that mimics Civic, but it also wasn't really ever activated as a data ecosystem. So a lot of your problem that you're describing has to do with the fact that folks didn't really use it much for a while. They're using it more now, but in the beginning, a lot of those data elements that were anticipated weren't even occupied, or the data quality was really poor. A lot of the reported amounts of use, for example, if you added up, it exceeded the annual rainfall by like 1,000 or something like that, right? So there was just a lot of data quality problems that we hope to improve by making flat files and accessible eRIMS data. But that data model problem is common, and we've actually, we beat our heads against the wall for a few years about how do you go back and enforce better data models on existing databases. And we're looking at WADE and WAMDAM and some of the work that Otto talked about yesterday, as well as some of the work in Australia with Peter Taylor and Cicero gave us some references of how they used idealized data models to now drive data towards. So hopefully we would have a more interoperable ecosystem in the future, because we're going to take things like regulatory data, inspections. Everyone in our building does inspections, but they probably have a different database and a different schema they use to track them. But at the end of the day, they're inspections that we do. So if we can build an ideal data model for like regulatory data and observations data and fiscal data, for example, then the database structure itself isn't as important, because we're going to work on transforming the data up into the idealized models. So that's kind of where we're thinking right now.
Hallelujah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there one person who really understands all of these data systems that are available through CalEPA, that if you have any question about where the data is, how you can get it, help you navigate through the different people that you need to go through? Is there any one person who really understands the system that you can just, anyone can go to and get help? No?
No. Can you build us a bot that does that, though? No, honestly, so Walter's got a new job. It's enterprise data manager or something like that at Caltrans. The Department of Transportation is wise to do that. I don't think the boards and departments in this building are thinking about assigning one person within each agency, let alone at the agency level. But I think for us to sort of get at what the point of my talk was about, of being better service providers to the communities in California, that's one of the most important jobs, is like a data engagement wizard or some sort of cool title like that. And then they get to know all this stuff, and they get to also push internally for publication of high-value data sets. But it doesn't exist right now. In the meantime, call Rafa. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is in regards to reaching out to a diverse set of people to pull them in and have them looking at what's going on and get everybody involved. My background's in molecular biology and genetics, and human development and development from conception to death of all model organisms. One thing that I was interested in was that women, if you're looking to pull women into the scientific side of it, they develop three-dimensional thinking more strongly in their 20s. What happened to me was somebody from Berkeley came to me when I was doing well in college and said, let's talk about what you're doing, and pulled me in, which changed my life, really. I wouldn't have known. My dad's a scientist, but still, there was nobody but saying, wow, you're so good in chemistry. So looking at people after they're in high school, after when they're showing signs in early college, and maybe working through the schools to reach out to those people and go into science and be advocates and leaders in their families, communities, groups, might be an avenue to start reaching out, looking at when people develop certain skills is as important as reaching out. If you told me at 15 that this was the degree I was going to get, I'd have laughed, really.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And thank you for that. I don't even know what I can add other than just reinforce that sometimes sideways engagement at different levels of education is really important. And we found with this hackathon in Stockton, for example, that the connections to the community colleges there, I mean, all the really excited data science water people I've run into in the last couple of years have pretty much come through a community college system. And so, there is a lot of transformation that happens later in life. So I applaud that, and thank you for speaking up. I think I'm over time. So I want to thank my funders, you. So bye.